City of East Providence, City Council Joint School Committee meeting this evening. If we could start off on our end on the council side with a roll call. Do we have anybody here for roll calls? Start with the council, and then we'll proceed with the school committee for the roll call as well.
Councilman Cahoon.
Here.
Councilman Morado.
Here.
Councilwoman Souza.
Here.
Council Vice President Rodericks.
Here.
And Council President Brito.
Yeah.
All here.
Thank you. Thank you and welcome. Today is Monday, May 2nd, believe it or not, 2022. As the chairman, Montiel, if he would like to start off with a roll call on his end as well.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to call the school committee meeting to order, and no need for a roll, but without objection, I will defer to the council president and the city council agenda as they mirror, and I will defer the lead to you as a good host that we are.
So before we proceed, if we may all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So, Chairman Montero, if you would like to proceed with Councilman Cahoon as to what we're going to be discussing, just as an introduction, and we can lead right into the presentation, I guess.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I will actually defer to Superintendent Catherine Crowley. We're here this evening to hear a presentation, see a presentation from our partners at Peregrine and AI3, and I will let Superintendent Crowley give an overview of what we are to see.
I'm standing on my tiptoes. Wait a minute. Hold on. Right. Good evening, everyone. I never thought I would be appearing here before this illustrious group again regarding a building project, but here I am about 3 years after I first came to you. I'm going to give you a little history why we are here this evening. The Rhode Island Department of Education approached us about the new state construction bond for $300 million that will be on the ballot this November. This time, the distribution of money will be very different and will be based on need and the 20% in incentives given up front. And we were encouraged to apply as, number one, we were extremely successful in the implementation of our last bond and building this structure that you are presently sitting in this evening. And secondly, Martin was number 2 in the Jacobs report as needing renovation and improvement for health and safety of our students. So tonight, along with our team here, Sam Bradner, who's going to be presenting tonight, our OPM, Jim Jordan from the wonderful architectural firm AI3. We are here to ask you tonight to allow us to be able to submit a Stage 2 application. We submitted a Stage 1, which was simply a letter of intent. Now, by September 15th, we are obligated to submit a Stage 2. We are not asking for anything tonight but for you to support a resolution which would allow this bond to go on the ballot for November 2022 for this project. The timeline is significant. Rep. Amori, who's with us here this evening, will tell you that my drop-dead date for getting the information to him is May 19th. Now, I would like to present to you Sam Bradner, and we are going to go through the fiscal study that we had done and concentrating mainly on Martin and Waddington Elementary Schools. So, Sam? Oh, Jim's gonna go? Sorry. Okay, Jim Jordan from AI3 first. Sorry, Jim.
Well, thank you, Superintendent Corrali, and good evening to the members of the school committee and city council. If we could advance to the next slide. Basically, we're going to provide an overview tonight of the process. Sam will focus on the overview. I'm just going to give you a high-level snapshot of where we are in the stage 2 process, and then later on in the presentation, I will talk about the options that we studied and what we've witnessed in the facilities evaluation that we're currently finalizing. Next slide, please. So as you might know, AI3 and our team of professionals are in the process of completing the RIDE Stage 2 submittal for the district. The general outcome of the Stage 2 process is to really identify and prioritize the need of each school. Martin Middle School stands out from all the schools in your district. Martin has the second highest facilities condition index in the state at 64.6%. The FCI, as we refer to it, is a general indicator of a school's overall health. Martin Middle School is in extremely poor condition and a candidate for replacement. Likewise, Waddington Middle School has unique challenges associated with the facility as well. Although their FCI index is below Martin's index, the school has significant facility deficiencies which impacts the delivery of educational programs and compromises the safety and security of the students. Part of RIDE Stage 2 process involves a comprehensive evaluation of all schools in the district by our team of architects, engineers, and specialists. The team we have assembled has toured each school in great detail, and we are currently preparing the updated 5-year capital improvement project list, which prioritizes each deficiency and assigns a cost value for each project at every school. Next slide. The existing conditions study our team is performing will evaluate all 7 elementary schools in East Providence, both of your middle schools, and of course your pre-K and early childhood learning center. I wanted to share with you a real high-level summary of some of the findings that we identified in Martin Middle School and Waddington Elementary School. I consider Martin's open classrooms and organization from an educational standpoint to be one of the worst facilities I've seen over the last 30 years in touring and evaluating facilities across the Northeast. I consider Martin's open classrooms to be subpar for modern 21st century educational learning. As you see in the top photo to the left under Martin Middle School, you'll see that the classrooms are designed with movable walls, which are inherently inefficient acoustical separations, especially when they're designed back in the 70s. They really weren't thinking about acoustics. It was just a visual barrier between 2 spaces. Because the majority of the classrooms do not have direct access to a hallway in the pods at Martin Middle School, classroom instruction is frequently interrupted by students and teachers who are passing through an adjacent classroom so they can exit their pods into the hallway. The pre-K room amenities do not have adequate accessibility for 3- and 5-year-olds. Here you see the district is trying to accomplish that with temporary means so that students and 3- or 4-year-olds can climb up those little sets of stairs into the sinks and beyond. A much more permanent solution is needed for the pre-K kids at Martin. Notwithstanding the HVAC units and the mechanical units and the plumbing systems are at the end of their useful life, The district has done what it can to keep those systems operational with continued maintenance, but the inherent structure and infrastructure of those systems is well beyond its useful life, and those systems need complete replacement. As you know, there are large, expansive student locker rooms which are inefficient. Here you see a photo of that. They're placed right in the center of the academic cores on both levels. They really take up a lot of room. They're rarely used, and that space could be more conducive for 21st century collaboration and high-tech programs that middle school students really need in the 21st century modern middle school. Looking at Waddington, you see this top photo here is very similar to the one at Martin Middle School. The addition is the real problem at Waddington Elementary School that was designed in the 70s, similar to the open school environment of Martin Middle School. What's worse about Waddington's solution to the open school environment is this half-height, not even half-height, wall partition. It's open on both sides to the classroom. There are no doors past it, and it's also open to the ceiling. It does not have any acoustical properties whatsoever, and all the classrooms but a handful that have been retrofitted by the school department are like this at Waddington. The other interesting thing about Waddington is you'll see these depressed areas on the second floor of every classroom. There's 8 classrooms on the first floor and 8 on the second floor, and it's inequitable between those 2 floors. These depressed areas comprise almost 200 square feet in all the second floor classrooms, and it really reduces the usable classroom area to about 500 square feet. So they're teaching out of a half-size classroom. In order to accommodate that, some teachers have moved their desks into this area and use it for storage and excess storage space. Some students use it for breakout areas. The tragedy of it all is it pushes those kids further away from the exterior walls and closer to the hallway where there's more noise being generated and limits their ability to access natural daylight from the exterior wall. So it is really a compromise on all facets at Waddington. Not to mention the exterior walls and door system and window systems and doors need to be replaced, and they're at the end of their useful life. There needs to be significant look at the exterior skin of the brick. Here you see some brick peeling away from the exterior due to water infiltration, which is a problem, a lot of spalling brick on this facility. And we're really highlighting 2 facilities that we see the greatest need, and that's what we're all about when the Stage 2 process, identifying the greatest need here in East Providence and comparing these buildings to all your buildings throughout the district. Next slide. The last slide I'm going to touch on is the capital improvement projects. You're all very familiar with this. Your current CIP, as we refer to it, is a 5-year plan. You're in your last year of that 5-year plan. A lot of great work has been done across the district to manage the deficiencies associated with each school. However, a new plan is required by RIDE to be updated and submitted with the Stage 2 submittal. So as I mentioned earlier, our team of professionals and engineers are really looking at all the systems and all the facets of every school building in East Providence, whether it's HVAC, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, window status, exterior envelope continuity, any kind of areas that need attention, we're going to prioritize from a ranking 1 through 5. We're going to put a cost estimate associated with each of those repair items that are listed in this 5-year capital improvement plan and give you a prioritized scope of what needs to happen, year 1 and what can wait till year 5. So that's where we are in the Stage 2 process. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, and she'll touch on a handful of other items. Thank you.
What I want to emphasize at this point is the fact that if this is the time for, next slide, please. This is the time, if East Providence is going to do this, to do it. Number 1, this is the last of the state bonding to come out. Gina Raimondo proposed $500 million, $250 million. Was identified at the last election. $300 million is going to be on for this coming election. Your reimbursement rate has gone down from 54.5 to 48.1%, as you can see on this slide. That rate next year will be 42. East Providence is becoming wealthier, so your reimbursement rate is going down. Now, if you submit now and it's approved, you will have 5 years in which to use that money. So you lock stage 2 in. You lock it in. You don't have to start immediately. It's locked in for 5 years. On top of that 48.1%, we'll have potentially 20% in additional reimbursements. We'll itemize them as we submit them in stage 2. So the potential for reimbursement is 68.1% total potential reimbursement. Now, in addition to that, we were told that the upfront monies that we received for the high school that we're going to receive here for Martin would be $10 million. We can also place that money directly on the bond, reducing it further. Now, we have in there approximately $100,000 for district general budget on a regular, the district general funds. On a regular basis, we establish a capital improvement line item. Every year, we use that line item to complete various projects that are in our facilities plan. For example, we have 3 window projects that were scheduled for this summer. Unfortunately, with the way things are right now, and a department in the state that wasn't really cooperative with us, we were behind. The windows are going to be delivered, but we are going to not put them in this summer. We're going to have to put them in next summer because they're not going to come in on time in order to do the projects this summer. That would have been the Historical Society, I'll name them. But anyway, the money is there for those projects. It comes out of our capital improvement line item. In our capital improvement line item right now, we have $2.7 million for our projects. We keep adding money to that line item because every project we do is reimbursable at the reimbursable rate for the city. So we keep it cyclical, we keep it ongoing, so we can do the projects that we need to do in the other schools as well. I mentioned the $10 million as pay-as-you-go funding being right up front and being able to go towards the bond. The capital improvement plan has to be updated. It has 1 more year on it, so we're going to work with AI3 to update that capital improvement plan for the other schools. Thank you, and now Sam Bradner.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Superintendent. I'm going to just touch on a couple process slides before Jim goes into a little bit more detail around the design concepts that they've been working on for the past couple months. The superintendent referenced this, and I think it's important to understand kind of what we're trying to accomplish now. Due to the legislative calendar, we all understand that the legislature ends their session in June. So that accelerates up the need at least to get the enabling legislation, which is required for any local bond referendum that you're going to place to be approved. This is the same situation that you went through back in 2018 when you placed that bond, for the voters back then. So what we have is an accelerated process at least to get the enabling legislation in. Kathy mentioned that in order to ensure approval by the end of the session, we need to have the resolution in from the local the local governance, city council, school committee, if they see it appropriate to do that, in order for us to continue with the process. Just to be very clear, this is not the last time we would be before either of these bodies. There will be a whole design evaluation, further cost evaluation, further process evaluations could be happening through the summer. So we have this early deadline and goal that we need to get through while the team continues to work through the entire process. So I think that's just information that's useful for everybody that's in the room this evening. And you know, some of the, I guess, the challenges if you do not go before a November referendum would be that you would get your approval in the fall from the Rhode Island Department of Education. You're then on a clock in order to get your referendum in place, which would put you into a special election scenario, which would place you sometime in the spring of 2023. We believe that there is likely going to be much more competition for these statewide school construction dollars with this second round that's coming out. I think, you know, East Providence High School has been a great example to a lot of communities. I don't know how many different districts, school committees, building committees that we've toured through this building in the last year. But everybody's seen the success and what can actually happen when you put a lot of hard work in, you get the community to really support a process and deliver what I think we would all agree is a great facility that you have here. So again, just a snapshot into kind of why we're here tonight and the process that's immediately in front of us. Not to say that we're not going to have a lot more discussion with everybody in this room as we go forward. Next slide, please. And then just briefly on what we've done to date, and this, you know, in retrospect, I probably should have put this at the front of the slide deck, so I'll take that. But you know, how we got here today was we came before the school committee back in January. At that time, the superintendent had the same conversation around that RIDE, you know, had encouraged and talked to the district about the opportunity that was out there with the funding side of things that the superintendent just went through, the success of the high school project and all the hard work that went into that, and that schools like Martin were at the top of the need list, you know, when you look at it across the state. So Jim and his team, the AI3 team, as Jim mentioned, they're architects, engineers, spent 2 months going through every single building, evaluating those facilities from an engineering standpoint, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, architectural, structural, everything. And also in combination with that, doing visioning sessions. So working with teachers, working with some of the leadership of the district, really honing in on what is the vision for what the middle school could become, really focusing on the middle school, but also thinking about some of the other district-wide improvements were out there. All that information plus your demographics update, which is key because demographics really set the design population for your schools. And how RIDE does that is they look at the 5-year out projection to say how many children should this design be accommodating, because we know that demographics move depending on you know, growth in the community, different trends, national, international, COVID, obviously, things like that will influence those numbers. And all those are culminating in what Jim will present shortly, which is this concept development, and then the initial cost estimate, which will speak to the budget after these slides and how that informed our process to be presenting you at least with the overall number this evening. So I'll turn it over to Jim to walk us through the design.
May I stop for 1 second?
Certainly.
Just to remind folks, since it's been a little bit since we've been through this, and sorry, I've got feedback here. So the RIDE process for school construction calls for submitting certain information in certain stages. You call out stage 1 here. Per my recollection, when we went through stage 1 with the high school project, stage 1 is essentially establishing the need, right? Describing the need to RIDE, getting RIDE to sign off, yes, you have a need. And there are very specific information requirements that go along with stage 1. Stage 2 is essentially where we propose to RIDE. This is our solution to meet that need. Do you concur, correct?
Yeah, and it's a great point, Councilman Cahoon, that, you know, those, and we take it for granted that everybody knows all the steps through the State Department process, but that is very much exactly what it is. Define the need. That was submitted in February. RIDE came back very quickly with an approval, a conditional approval on your stage 1. again, because we had a lot of communication with them. Stage 2, which we'll talk about at the end of the meeting with our go-forward tasks, will be submitted in September. And then RIDE will review that, and if they approve, then your project in its entirety is approved with all the conditions that they put against that. I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thank you, Sam. Next slide. Oh, there we go. If you could hold it there, that's great. We developed options to address the educational and physical needs of the Martin Middle School project. These options included comprehensive renovation options, new school options, and as well as new options with light renovation of the existing building, and I'll get to that detail in a moment. The option we wanted to share with you today is the hybrid new construction option, as we refer to it. It takes some key program spaces that the Martin Middle School has that you can't really replicate if you were just to demolish the entire facility and build from scratch. RIDE would not recognize an auditorium for a middle school. It's a cafetorium. It's a combination of student commons and a stage at one end, what's referred to as a cafetorium. They wouldn't recognize the large gymnasium. I think it's over 21,000 square feet that you have at the current Martin Middle School, and you'd be able to build, funded, 8,150 square feet. So a tremendous hit to the community asset that you currently have in an auditorium and a gymnasium, as well as your performing arts areas, band, choral, music, including your fitness center. Those kinds of spaces could not be replicated in a new program, and you'd be funding those 100% if you chose to go forward with that. The good news is that your school at Martin has those amenities, and they're in fairly good condition. They need light renovation. So our recommendation is to keep those programs, as you see here, and build new construction around that. So what we have here tonight is what we refer to as a new hybrid construction option. It's divided into 3 major phases. Phase 1 shown in blue, Phase 2 in the middle in this yellow font and text and diagrams, and then Phase 3, which is really focused on the exterior of the building. Those 3 phases culminate to about 32 months of construction overall. Here you see all the square footages associated with those types of build-outs that are required to make this come to fruition, whether it's new construction, comprehensive renovation, light renovation, and new addition. All those have different price points in the current market when you're designing school facilities and constructing them. So looking at this option, what you'll see is an overall site plan. Here you have the footprint of the existing Martin Middle School dashed in. And this phase is identifying a couple of major steps that need to take place. The first of which is relocating the existing sewer easement that runs directly through the heart of the Martin Middle School project and pulling it to the west on the outside of the facility, get that out of the way. Also, there'll be some water line relocation efforts that would have to take place. Maybe we could avoid that with more detailed building design and analysis that'll come in the future, similar to how we approach the high school project. But we're assuming that those things would need to be done as step 1. Step 2 would really be to pretty much start construction, get the contractor on site in April of 2024. That gives them several months to mobilize, start possibly doing some trenching work here for that work, and then also to get ready to build the major component of the new middle school, which would be about a 72,000 square foot, 3-story new academic core, separate from the existing footprint. So this could be constructed without impacting the current operations of the Martin Middle School. And that's an important first step because it provides the much needed swing space you need for the following 17 months when the students return to school in the fall of 2025. They can arrive in this new 3-story academic core. And they'll also have access to the lightly renovated gymnasium and auditorium and music spaces, which would occur over a summer phase. Doing that would give the students in almost 17 months' time pretty much half of their new school constructed. That would allow the demolition of the old Martin Middle School learning pods that I showed you photos of previously. And the existing fields would remain operational behind the school during construction. We're also looking at installing a retaining wall that would help pull some of the grade further away from the existing footprint of Martin to allow in Phase 3 more field use at the front of the school where it's needed, as well as expanded parking. So in the fall of 2025, we would move into Phase 2, which would have the new students in the new wing and also occupying the gymnasium. There'll probably be a temporary connector between these two to keep students away from construction. And this area in yellow would compromise new student commons space that could be shared by the students, new library media center space, centrally located, and really creating what we refer to as a community core at the heart of the new Martin School. In order to do that, about 9,000 square feet of temporary modules would have to be brought onto the site. That's for the pre-K programs. There's 6 current pre-K schools at Martin. They'd be vacating their space at this area here to the south and moving into these new modulars for about a year. That would allow this area to be demolished and rebuilt by the contractor with new construction, including a new 14 classroom pre-K program proposed for the new Martin Middle School. Finally, in Phase 3, the entire new school will be utilized. Students would be occupying it, faculty and staff, and then the site work would be the balance of the work, which would include new flex fields in front of the new school. There'd be a new access drive, which picks up the current entry and exit points on the campus off of Brown Street. That retaining wall will allow more parking to be designed in and adjacent to it. And it would also allow flex fields. Maybe there's some youth-sized soccer fields that would fit into these spaces, but much needed outdoor green space for the students. There would also be a dedicated pre-K area for students, as well as more field space for pre-K use as well, and also community use. Next slide, please. So how does this all look on the site? Here you still see the aerial photograph of the existing Martin Middle School below. Here you'll see that we have the renovated space of the large gymnasium, fitness center, auditorium, and music programs. And then we're designing in a real heart of the school, the community core as we refer to it. It has a new student commons, which could be shared by 6 through 8 students, as well as pre-K students, and become a real community asset for East Providence. We also have 2 dedicated entries, one for grades 6 through 8 with administration and a checkpoint, and then also a new entry for pre-K students, both on the front of the school for safety and security. It would have a satellite administration suite associated with it to monitor the entry, as well as its dedicated entry here. And this would be a 2-story pre-K program with dedicated stair towers, so other older students are not using those stair towers as well, keeping the younger kids safe for that program. And it also includes an indoor play area as well as the outdoor play area I showed you in the previous slide. There's a lot of obstructions on the site, whether they're wetland setbacks or 100-foot riverfront setbacks, as you see here in these blue dashed lines. But we believe that the building can be organized to avoid those and avoid the cost of impacting those. From a sustainability standpoint, whenever you are making these early moves, you're always thinking about energy efficiency and maximizing sustainable strategies on any building design, and we've taken that into consideration as well. Our goal would be to get this building to net zero ready. Whether you purchase the PV panels or not, you'd have the infrastructure in place to be net zero ready. And that all comes to fruition with how we lay out these new spaces. When you have classrooms organized around the central collaboration hallway, you want to make sure that that's organized on an east-west axis, which this accomplishes, facing due south, as well as the pre-K program to the south. Next slide, please. Here's some more information about the details of the building plans themselves. Again, for ease of orienting yourself, this is the existing program that will be lightly renovated and taken over into the new construction that wraps around. The organization of the academic core, you see in this upper corner shown in blue, is a 3-story component. It'd be 6th grade on the lower floor and 8th grade on the upper floor, with 7th grade in the middle. The new community space will be installed in front of the existing programs to give you the illusion that the entire school is brand new and hide the front of these existing programs that'll be renovated. And then, of course, the pre-K program, 2 stories at the south side, would be installed as part of phase 2 of this construction process. One thing we want to point out is the massing overall is designed with sustainability in mind, with the larger, taller of the programs oriented to the north so that it doesn't block natural light coming into those classrooms or cast shadows on other programs. So all these little nuances are coming to fruition as we push this design concept forward. Next slide, please. Here's some perspective views of the initial design concept that we're studying. Here's a view north with the pre-K, the renovated component here, the new community core at the center, the existing city-owned fields at the back, the green space I referred to previously, as we refer to it as flex fields, reorienting the access drive and connecting to the existing curb cuts, and then also new parking that'll take advantage of more flat land on the campus, so the school will have a nice front yard associated with it that can be used by the community and also educational programs within the new Martin. The nice thing is you have two main entries separated so they can easily be monitored, and it really creates, I believe, a real warm and welcoming campus feel, which has all its visibility is facing Brown Street, and it definitely has a front face to the Martin. You're not entering on the side like you currently do in the design. And here's a view from the opposite direction showing you the existing three-story academic core, or the new three-story academic core, I should say. Next slide. Just want to touch on some of the ideas and thoughts we had for Waddington Elementary. I referred to a lot of these in the last speaking portion I had previous to Sam and Superintendent. We're showing you here the first floor and second floor. The green areas and the list on the left side show you the projects that we have planned for Waddington. As I mentioned, the inefficient layout of this two-story academic core really does create a lot of inequity, not only within the school itself, but also difficulties on how education can be delivered in those open classrooms. The most important thing is addressing the open classrooms by removing that partition walls highlighted in these green zones here, installing a permanent sound sensitive wall system with sound deadening material between the studs, and terminating those walls properly to the floor and ceiling so that they are acoustically sound, and also creating visible entries that can be partitioned off in case there's a lockdown event on the campus. The second thing I mentioned earlier was infilling the second floor, the depressed areas in the floors that you see here on the second floor. It's a very large area you see shaded in blue. That's a little over 200 square feet, and it's really not even close to the size of the classrooms that's usable on the first floor. So we want to bring that equity back to both floors for all the teachers. We're also looking at safety and security measures, having upgrades to the security system, so it is tied into the main entry of the school on the opposite end of the facility, pretty much down here. There really is no way to partition this off remotely, and we want to introduce that capability because this is pretty remote on the campus and removed from the main entry. We're also looking at upgrades for handicap accessibility. There's been a number of projects that the district recently completed with upgrades to handicap accessible toilet rooms, especially in this core here. We want to continue that throughout the remainder of the building and also address ADA compliance issues throughout, which would include classroom entries. There's not enough room for a wheelchair to have the proper push and pull distances in and out of every classroom, and that would have to be upgraded with the comprehensive renovations, as well as fire safety, fire alarm systems, and sprinkler systems proposed for this facility, really bring it up to standard. So with that, I think, next slide, please. I will turn it back to Sam.
Thank you, Jim. So we talked a little bit about process earlier. So the team has been on board since January. A lot of data collection happening early, through the winter into the early spring. Concept development really happened in the last 60 days. And all with a goal towards getting to this first step, knowing that the enabling legislation was driving some of this information to come out even before we go through the rest of the stage 2 process. So the AI3 team went through a pretty detailed cost estimating step over the last 30 days with the information that you just saw with those designs, so that they and their cost estimator could develop a better understanding of the overall cost for the Martin Middle School improvements. And that includes both that, Jim talked about the light renovation of that, of the core area that would be preserved, more of those community space, gymnasium, auditorium, some of the fitness space in the core, as well as the new construction that would happen kind of wrapping around. So the estimator went through a detailed analysis of that. They also looked at the phasing that Jim presented. So the fact that this would happen over several sequences. If we think back to the high school, the benefit that you had here was you could basically cut off the back half of the site, build new, move everybody in, and then flip and then do that work, the remainder of the work that we see out front today that's still ongoing. So that phasing was also taken into consideration as we look at the duration of the project, because as you march out in time, costs will escalate because that's just natural, never mind even some of the influences that we've had over the last 18 to 24 months with the impact of COVID on supply chain and escalation and everything else. His team also looked at the improvements to Waddington that we just went through. So how do we go through a logical sequencing of that work out there? Obviously a smaller project, but still an intense amount of work. How does that happen over time, building that time into that cost? And then in general, building in the contingencies and the escalation that we know are real today. I don't think anybody in this room has not experienced some kind of cost increases, whether it's in a product in your house, or if you're in the construction industry, or if you've watched the construction industry over the last 2 years. We've all seen the wild fluctuations that we see that have been rippling through the marketplace. So the estimator working with AI3, who was the estimator that worked with us on the high school project as well, really spent a lot of time trying to inform the trends that we've seen most recently, which I would say have been the most violent. And what do we see as, will there be a return to normalcy? Or at least will there be a leveling off of some of the rapid up and down movements that we had over the last 2 years? So those factors were all built into this cost estimate, as well as the duration of the project, and as well as some of the more traditional contingencies that we build in to make sure that the owner is protected as they go through a construction project. In addition to that, so that really represents your hard costs, that total there, that 126.4. Soft costs are all the non-construction related costs for the project. So architects, engineers, project managers, utility connections, inspections, all those things that aren't controlled by the contractor that sit on the owner side. And then ultimately the furniture, fixtures, equipment, and technology. So that would be for, and we use the RIDE approved ratios, the per student ratios that they have in their guidelines for budgeting, to determine what would be that cost to, once you're done with all this construction, for every room to have brand new furniture in it, brand new technology in it, not exactly the same as the high school, but serve it, really achieve that same goal of brand new educational space, brand new educational furniture, technology, and equipment in that space in order to deliver that 21st century learning environment for both the students and the faculty. So what that gets us to right now, and really, again, the goal for right now is to establish what we believe to be the not-to-exceed bond amount. So as you can see up here, with all those components brought together, that gets you that $148 million project total. We will spend a lot more time talking about this budget for the next 2 to 3 years. Folks that have been involved in the high school project know that we still talk about budget every single day as we evaluate changes, final completion of the building, and that process. So the budget discussion never stops. But what we had to do right now is establish that first line in the sand to make sure that we understood what we believe to be our ultimate exposure, and then to continue to work on that through the stage 2 process and even further into stage 3. Yes, Kathy.
So what we want you to keep in mind is, yes, you have to bond for the full amount, but with the 68.1% and then the 10 million of upfront money placed on top of the bond, you'd be talking about doing both these projects in the range of $40 to $42 million. So you've got to keep that in mind.
Next slide, please. So, and if you can follow all the colors without getting dizzy. I just want to talk a little bit about the process going forward, because we know we've thrown a lot of information at the collective bodies today. So obviously this evening was an opportunity for both bodies to hear about the project, to understand it a little bit more, and to have dialogue with ourselves as well as each other. What we are proposing is a pretty rapid succession of discussions in the next 2 weeks in order to get to that submission on May 19th to the legislature, so that this can move through the legislative process. So right now, tentatively, we've talked about a school committee hearing on the 12th, which is a week from this coming Thursday, a city council meeting on the 17th, which is at your regularly scheduled meeting, and then immediately getting a joint resolution signed by the appropriate leadership folks. That would then allow for that submittal to the local delegation by the 19th, and then for that to move through that process at the General Assembly. Again, in order to have come out of that, the enabling legislation only. That's the only thing that will come out of this step right now. Work will continue in earnest. Schematic plan refinement will be happening constantly over the next 90 to 120 days. We'll be working on that well into August. We will then go through another round of cost estimating and budgeting, so that we ensure that we're keeping on track with the numbers that we presented tonight, or improving those numbers. We can never guarantee that, but obviously we'll have an upside limit. We expect and would encourage recurring discussions with both bodies as we go through that process, so that we don't want the folks here to think that this is the last time you see this discussion. In fact, this is just the beginning of we think a long several meetings with both groups as we go through that process. Ultimately, that will culminate in a joint approval of the Stage 2 submittal. And again, for those who were around back in 2017, when that Stage 2 went in, it's a document that's usually about 1,500 to 2,000 pages. Sits about yay high. It's got a set of full schematic documents, which are, call it 20 to 25% complete. And that will then go into RIDE no later than September 15th of this year. RIDE then goes through their approval process. They have scheduled meetings in the fall where the Council on Primary and Secondary Education will go through and review that based on the RIDE School Building Authority's recommendation. And then ultimately, if we are successful, which we believe we will be, because we've had a pretty good track record both with this team and with others, is that you would have a Stage 2 approval that would come out in the fall. In parallel to that, you would have, again, if approved by the groups, you would have a bond referendum on Election Day of this year. And then that would allow you to proceed to the next stage, which is Stage 3. And that's really the detailed design that starts after you've really put in a lot of effort, but really that's just the beginning of the process, not the end. Again, for those who were involved in the high school project, we started Stage 3, and that lasted 18 to 24 months of detailed design on the high school and early start of construction. So this is, again, the beginning of a long, or not a long process, but a very kind of detailed but understood process by the collective team, and I would say the district as well, who's gone through this work before.
Sam, if I may, and first I'll apologize. I did not thank the members of the council and school committee for coming out for this special meeting. But to Kathy's point on the numbers and the timing of this, we talk about capturing that reimbursement rate as it's anticipated to decline even more. But in speaking with city finances, Mr. Moore, and I know the mayor and Mr. Moore have been in contact with Superintendent and Mr. Enos. There's essentially a placeholder now in the city's budget with this high school project. You know, and just to kind of recap, right, so we were at a 189.5 bond with a net expense to the city of 88 when you factor in the reimbursements that came in. But that placeholder is larger than that 88. And as most of us in this room know, you know, you can say you're going to do something, but as soon as you let time go by, those dollars put aside for something end up going someplace else. And this is the time for the city to, if done responsibly, we should be able to take on that 42, I have 44 maybe in full disclosure in my math, but if it's a $44 million net expense, essentially should be able to drop right into that placeholder and equate to no additional cost to the taxpayers with the way that the budget is lined up. That's how my math and my questions, and I've asked the question of the city's finance, 8 ways to Sunday on that, to make sure that my understanding of how this project here that we're sitting inside of was budgeted on your budget, and that's why the time is now, because essentially we should be able to reuse those reimbursement funds, repurpose them, and really get more bang for the buck, literally. So.
Mr. President, if I could add, I would like to state very strongly that I very much like the hybrid model. We know we can't afford to knock down the entire complex, and we would not get reimbursed or monies for the core arts area. The problem at Martin and to some degree at Waddington wasn't a lack of maintenance or a man-made problem with keeping up with the building. It was a very poorly designed educational plan. There was no way that you could fix it other than what I've seen here initially, and I know we're going to have a lot of other meetings and there may be some adjustments, but this is the only way to fix this problem. A school without windows and doors and corridors can't be fixed. You don't pull those things out of the air. You need to replace them, but yet we have a beautiful auditorium, we have a beautiful gymnasium, a nice cafeteria, and they can stay. My one question is if you could illuminate what you mean, or if someone on the panel could illuminate a little bit when you talk about light renovations. What is an example of a light renovation, let's say in the auditorium or the gym?
Thank you. That's a very good question. It's basically the extent at which we're asking the contractor to go in there, and is it a full gut? Is it ripping down everything down to the studs, for instance? The answer is no, it would not be. You got new seats there that could be repurposed. It's really just, I don't want to say patch and paint. It's a little bit more than just that. It's refinishing, pretty much focusing on finishes and taking a closer look at the mechanical systems and fine-tuning those, but reusing what's there now to the fullest extent possible. As you mentioned, it's in very good condition, and that's the reason why we want to leave it in place. The big thing is the square footage it provides. You can't have a 6,500 square foot auditorium in the new RIDE program. That square footage is very valuable. So if we look at a comprehensive renovation cost of about, I'd say $390 a square foot, we're looking in the order of magnitude of about $220 for the square foot cost for the gymnasium and the auditorium. So that's what we refer to as light. It's not a full-blown gut redo, all systems and all finishes. It's salvaging what's there and repurposing the majority of it.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Jordan, we talked about the reimbursement rate on the school. However, it hasn't been mentioned about the reimbursement rate on the rebates. What type of rebates you looking at if you're looking at a net zero ready school, or project, I should say?
Yep. You want to take that, Superintendent? No? Oh, I thought you were turning around. Sorry. Mario sent us an updated list of items that we have to comply with the design, not only square foot requirements, but also green requirements. And there is a requirement to comply with Northeast CHIPS 3.0, and I believe they do offer incentives for making the school, quote-unquote, green school. 2%, I believe, is what? 2%. Yep, 2%. So you get an extra 2% for green school features with the height, which is exactly what the high school, this building, is obtaining with all the green features that were designed into it. I think there's also the hidden value of rebates from N-Grid and other things like that when we start talking about LED light fixtures in the classroom and on the campus, things like that. We could start talking about electric vehicle charging stations, putting those into the campus, and I'm sure there's rebates and programs for that. And then finally, looking at the building holistically, and we don't have this information yet because we need to do more design work, but what energy savings will the building offer the district long term? Every year, can you save energy by making this building obtain net zero energy? What's that delta? And we have all the analysis now that we've obtained in the stage 2 process, all the electric costs, all the gas costs that you have. What does it mean to go to not using fossil fuels in the new Martin Middle School and making it all electric? And what kind of savings will you reap the benefits of year after year by having a high-performance school?
And with that being said, does that include solar panels as well, or solar panel ready?
Solar panel ready, absolutely. Whether you finance the panels yourself or you go into a power purchase agreement to purchase those from a third party, and how do you gain benefits from that, we'll need to discuss that with vendors that are interested in the project. I've done a handful of projects where the district chose to finance the cost of the panels upfront, and their savings, cost savings is tremendous. And those are 3 net zero ready schools that we recently designed. So we'll show you how to get there. There's pros and cons to either path that you take, and there's a lot of data that we have to analyze to get you that overall package on how much energy savings you'll have from the new Martin compared to the old Martin.
Mr. President, may I?
Please.
Jim, you'll recall that when we went through the early design decisions on the high school, while the facility needs were substantial and visible to everyone, really the whole key to the design of this building was the fact that we built a 21st century school, right? We went from 1 science lab to, 11 or 12 science labs now. We went from classrooms having 1, maybe 2 electrical outlets in the classroom, which may or may not work, to multiple outlets to be able to facilitate education where things like computers are used. You made a comment about Martin earlier, where you called it, I believe, and I'll paraphrase, one of the worst schools that you've seen, at the middle school level. Can you speak a little bit to what it is about what you've seen there that makes it one of the worst schools, and specifically what it lacks, acoustics and security aside, those are fairly obvious, what it lacks in terms of programming that keeps it from being a 21st century school?
Right, and I do want to clarify that statement. What I was trying to emphasize was its educational layout from an architectural standpoint. It's one of the worst schools I've seen. It comes from the era in the 1970s where there was this push and movement to have open classrooms, rooms with outdoors. They thought maximum flexibility was the wave of the future, and it couldn't be further from the truth. You're living the difficulties of that kind of plan layout at Martin, where students and teachers are passing through adjacent classrooms so they could just get to a hallway so they could exit their pod. It's very disruptive. It's not conducive for students with disabilities that need to focus and be included in the classrooms of today. It's very disruptive for their learning styles, and it's disruptive for every student when they try to learn. The lack of natural daylight in that pod organization has a huge impact on how students learn. I could point to a number of studies, recent studies, that have shown what daylight means to enhancing student performance and test scores. Martin lacks that kind of natural daylight in their academic core. The walls are not even walls. They're movable walls that were designed to be opened up so you have a completely open pod area. That's great for hands-on collaboration, but it's not great for individual student learning and breakout spaces. What we designed here at the high school was a very forward-thinking educational delivery of 21st century high school programs. Martin really needs to be set up a delivery system for the middle school students to take advantage of the opportunities here in your new high school. So how can you create maker-builder spaces? How can you create 21st century collaboration zones where students are free to break out of their classroom, go into a separate space, and work independently in small groups? If they have access to those kinds of rooms directly off their classroom or within the classroom, quite frankly, which we've done recently on a new middle school in Massachusetts, the potential is tremendous for those students to thrive. And how do you bring in other students from different cultures around the world into your classroom? That's what's happening now at the middle school level. Spontaneous interaction with technology to help teachers really be facilitators and not lecturers. That's what's really missing from the Martin Middle School. And it starts with the architecture to support that forward vision.
Also, our science labs. Let's not forget them. You can't expect those children to come in from the middle school and just, start working in these science labs that are state-of-the-art science labs. They need some real science labs in each one of those houses for those students as well. So that's another program. They need an art room, a couple of art rooms dedicated with the desks that we have for art, for drawing. We don't have that there at Martin either. So programmatically, those are the kinds of things that we have to be thinking about to put in Martin. A robotics lab, we teach robotics there, but we use these tables. We don't have enough devices in that room to support the electricity we need in that room. So a robotics lab for those children, because they're really into the robotics. So those are the kinds of programs we'd be looking at as well.
And I think, Nate, you kind of touched on it, but, when we were working on this project, we're not, well, most of us, we're not educators on the building committee. So, the architects obviously lay out the floor plan, and just watching the educators, the educational professionals, get creative. Never in any conversation did we talk about having, fish tanks feeding, plant life that is used in the culinary program, right? So, I mean, that was not in the architectural design that was presented to us, but that's what the creative, ingenuity and drive of our educators are doing. And to the superintendent's point, I think, make the statement for what it's worth. We're looking at these two schools, but I think what we learned here at the high school is just how much more our teachers and our students want to do and can do if given the tools. And I think the community should continue this process. Today, we're talking about two schools driven primarily from a safety and security standpoint. And that kind of prioritizes it, but I think, again, looking at what we're doing, what they're doing here in this building at the high school should be the motivator for us to continue this next year, next project. We have students across this community that, and teachers that deserve that 21st century environment. And, you know, let's make it safe.
May I have one
Get
more,
those abilities.
Mr. President? When Celeste wrote the early grants to bring pre-K into, I don't know what's going on there. Ex-com officer, I can't make the microphone work. Celeste wrote the initial grants to bring pre-K into the district. And we worked very hard internally to retrofit existing space so that it was appropriate for kids of that age and education for that age group. We also met with a challenge within the community whereby there was a lot more demand than there was supply. I think pretty much every parent with kids at that age would like to get them into that program. They cannot all be in that program because there's limited space. RIDE runs the lottery to determine who gets in. We are envisioning 12 pre-K classrooms in the new Martin space per the design that we saw tonight, correct? Did I read that correctly? How many? 14. How many do we currently have district-wide, spread across multiple buildings?
We have 8 state pre-K, and we currently have 5 special ed early childhood classrooms. We want to take those children from Oldham and bring them down to the new facility, right? Leaving Oldham available again potentially for an increase in student population on that side of town, the Riverside part of town, because we understand there's some building projects going on there presently. So we're looking towards the future and potentially making that an elementary school again, because Waddington really is at max at this point. So, or universal pre-K is on the horizon, which is a problem for many districts, which means a requirement of all districts to offer pre-K programs. We are well on our way. We have almost half of our pre-K population in our programs today. We need to be able to supply some more of these classrooms. And when I was actually talking to Sam, and this is what we mean about back and forth, I think we need to look at more pre-K classrooms for Martin in case this happens, to be able to accommodate for our students. So we have several plans going there. Again, remember, this is a work in progress.
So,
Nate.
all right, so let's put the universal pre-K
Okay.
out of the picture for now. What we would be looking at is a situation where, you know, currently our principal splits her time
Yes.
among multiple facilities.
Yes.
She would not need to do that
No,
under this
she
plan.
would not.
You would be able to make for a more inclusive environment for those kids that are separated physically.
Definitely.
By bringing them all together. Okay. That's kind
Definitely.
of what I'm getting at. And we would have.
Making the classrooms more conducive. As you saw, some of them have to climb up steps to reach the sinks. You're required to have a sink and so many bathrooms. We could put a bathroom in each one of the rooms so the students don't have to go out, because when they have to go out, they have to go out in groups of 9, and there has to be someone with them. So if you have the bathroom in the room, it saves you a lot of time and effort with those students with the new design of the rooms.
And all of the other things that you
All
could
of
do
the
is,
other
like,
things
right,
that go with that.
Restrooms, nurses who are used to
Nurses,
dealing with that
yes.
population. You know, and it sounds like we would have at least a little more volume for those calls that I always get, like, hey, isn't there anything that you can do to get me into the lottery? No, there's
No,
nothing.
then we don't
But we
control
would
it.
have a little bit more room.
Yes, to
all right,
accommodate.
To alleviate the demand.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the panel? None on this side, Chairman?
No questions?
So at this point in time, we'd like to adjourn, make an adjournment. Like to make a motion for adjournment, anyone?
So moved.
Anyone like to second that motion? Councilman Cahoon? Aye. Councilman Morado?
Aye.
Councilman Roberts?
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza?
Aye.
And I for myself. Mr. Chairman?
And I will entertain a motion from school committee to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Azanero. Do we have a second? Second by Ms. Boshain. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.